Hey guys, welcome to Energy Emotion. I am here with Marisa Echeverria, and she is an amazingly talented actress, writer, and director. You can find her work on her blog. She reads like a girl, and she's done anything from film all the way to Shakespeare in the Park. So we're really excited to have her today.
We are. Thank you for having us.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here with you guys.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is the most joyful part for you in being a creator?
I think the most joyful part is working with other artists and the collaborative effort that goes into making almost anything. And that's always been what's drawn me. I started out singing in a choir, and even having different people harmonize together was always really something invigorating for me, and listening to that chord that's bigger than all of us, but that we're all involved in, was something really special. That's one of my early creative memories. So that kind of fed into everything else. Yeah.
Love that.
That kind of leads me into what did you want to be when you grew up?
A dentist.
A dentist. Okay.
You have beautiful teeth.
You really do.
Well, I broke my face when I was 9 years old. I fell off my bike. And so that was my first thing of this, dentist basically healed me. And I was like, you're amazing. I want to do that. And then I realized I just didn't have it in me to be a dentist. But that and I have a little bit of music and artistry in my grandparents. My grandfather was a mariachi violinist, and I played his violin for a long time, and I think I just couldn't deny that sort of other side of me, and so pretty quickly I realized that theater was a big part, singing music, and theater. Out of that kind of expression, I went toward acting, and very early on I realized that was always going to be part of it. Yeah.
You went to college for theater, right?
I didn't. I did a lot of theater in college, but I studied literature in college. I was also very type A. I am a super nerd. And so I still kind of wanted to do a very academic, I couldn't let that go at first. And so I did a comparative literature and also did a lot of theater, and started doing much more experimental theater as well in college. And that was amazing, and kind of a couple directors I met led me to New York. And I wound up doing an opera at the Brooklyn Academy of Music with a mentor of mine, Elizabeth Swados. And that led me into both sort of more commercial New York work and to and to graduate school at NYU. So I did finally go for just acting to graduate school.
So when did you start doing directing, writing?
I directed in high school even a little bit. I directed a production of The Fantastics in high school, and I remember even early on, friends, probably second grade, I was making shows with a friend of mine. She had this funny extra level in her house, and so we'd charge her parents 25 cents, and they'd come see our shows. So storytelling was always in my DNA, and now I see it with my daughters too, that's just, I think so many of us have creativity right encoded, and from an early age, that's undeniable. So I think that kind of storytelling, and I was a bossy little girl, leadership skills, I guess they want us to call it now. But I knew what I wanted, and so yeah, from very early on, high school, and then I directed a little bit in college, and in grad school I directed a project, even though I was there primarily for acting, and I continued to direct just in pieces. I think it's interesting. It was always very self-driven, the direction. I don't feel like acting, I always had people kind of helping guide, and directing has always been something very interior for me, that I find projects that I like and can't help but get my hands in them. So that's nice.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but through this whole, outlet of creativity, you've now started this blog, yeah? Can you tell us a little bit about the blog and how it sort of came about, and what's inspired you to put that out there?
Absolutely. I have a lot of different parts of me that I feel like all come together in this blog in an interesting way. So I am a big reader and a super nerd and very creative. I've always loved books, and my daughters started reading. We started reading picture books together, and I started discovering what bothered me about certain picture books. My older daughter, Zoe, was probably 3 at the time and fell in love with the Thomas the Trains because her cousin was obsessed with trains and gave her all his books, and they would play trains together. And we would read these books, and it would be all male. All the trains would be male, which they're trains. They could be anything. And yet in these books, I was frustrated because I wasn't seeing her represented in that. And finally one day she asked me for the 15th time in a row to read the book, and I said, okay, do you want Thomas to be a boy or a girl now? And I saw that change in her, that realization that it could be different, and she said, a girl. And I said, okay, do you want her name to be Thomas or something else? And she looked at me like, are you kidding, Thomas? She goes, Thomas. I'm like, okay, we won't change the name. So we kept Thomas, and Thomas was a girl, and we read the book, and halfway through, I'm really going. I'm like, yeah, And she puts her hand on me, and she goes, Mommy, stop. And my heart just sank, because as a feminist and as someone, I thought, oh no, she's already gotten used to it. She's 3 years old, and she's already used to it and doesn't want it to change. And I said, what? And she goes, let's name her Zoe, which is her name. Oh. And my heart just broke through a whole level. And I thought, she's found a way in. She sees herself now in this book. She sees herself represented. And so that sort of unlocked a whole playful world for us, where now books were more than just we're reading the story. They're conversation pieces, and they're worlds that we can kind of bust open, and worlds that she can envision herself in and find a new story out of. And ever since then, reading with her has been a whole new experience. And so I started writing about the books that we were reading together, and things that I discovered in them, and things that she enlightened for me in them. And it's been so I just write little essays about the books that I think are doing such a good job developmentally of helping our kids move forward, and books that seem to be sort of stuck somewhere in the past, I think.
Do you see that changing?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't have enough of a bead on the children's publishing world. I think it's hard. I've met a couple wonderful authors through the process, and they struggle. The ones that I really admire are struggling because I think it's a very commercial world. Obviously, you want to make money, and that makes sense. But it's harder to get these books that tell a sort of smaller tale out into the forefront. It's the glossy covers that parents buy. And I'm totally guilty of it too. My daughter ran up to me with this book, and it had this big cupcake on the front, and she was so excited about the cupcake picture. And I flipped through it with her, read it quickly in the store, and took it home, and then realized it has all these kind of old gender dynamics that, all the girls are sweet candy, and all the boys are sort of interesting, different foods. And I was like, there I went. I fell for it. So I wrote about that one too. But the other ones kind of take a while to grow on you, and they're classics years and years in the future. Corduroy, books like that. There's this wonderful author, Elisa Clevin, that I feel like all of her books, The Lion and the Little Red Bird, Welcome Home Mouse, are these books about conflict and dealing with those kinds of conflict, and they're very equitable gender-wise. There are boys and there are girls, and they help each other to move forward. And I feel like those books don't get, the front cover of Barnes and Noble in the same way. But I hope that little by little I think there are mothers out there and fathers, and they're reading these books to their kids and kind of pushing them forward and saying, these are the ones that my daughter can't stop reading, so.
If you had something that you wanted to say to the little girls, or even the parents that are reading the blog, or, sort of sharing these experiences of raising children and opening their perspectives, what would you say?
Get creative and find your own stories within the stories. Don't be afraid to... I resist going through and changing the pronouns to literally writing, and I'm okay with changing them as I tell the story, but I feel there's some kind of blasphemy of going and changing a book. But I realize now that that's not true. We read Harold and the Purple Crayon because I love that book, and Harold's a girl. We read Where the Wild Things Are, and Max is a girl in our house, and I realize there's something in me that sort of shifts when I do that. And I want to create a world where my daughters see that kind of creativity and adventure as something that they own and is separate from how they look or what they, is completely just the core of their being. And so I would say get creative and don't, feel like there's any ends to the box. Step outside the box and sort of see what would happen. I change the pronouns completely. Like if there are boys, I change them to girls, and girls, I change them to boys, and just see how that feels and notice in myself if I have anything that comes up because of those differences. But yeah, I would just say get creative and let your kids play with the ideas that they come up with from those books.
Do you remember as a little girl how reading those books impacted you? Because
completely. Oh, completely.
They're probably weren't books like that when we were younger.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot that are, I think of Corduroy all the time because it feels so beyond its time. I looked back when I read it to my daughters, and it's the protagonist is a little African-American girl who finds this teddy bear and kind of rescues him from the store that he lives in and gives him a home. And you don't even realize she's African-American when you're reading it because she's a full character. Her mother's a three-dimensional character, and her mother only says like 2 lines, I think, in the whole book. But the way it's written, it's poetry. You see so much in so few words. And it's magical what Don Freeman was able to do in that book. It's the same thing with Blueberries for Sal, which is a classic. And the first time I read it, I didn't even realize Sal was a girl. Sal's a name that could be either. She has super short hair. You don't think about it. And those were books that were read to me that I cherished and didn't even realize that they were girls. And in one case, a little girl of color. And so these things narratives matter in the hugest way. And I think these are the first things that little kids see, these narratives. And so sure, they see stories out in the world, but what you as a parent read to your child imprints. I remember deeply, books that The Giving Tree, I have such a complicated relationship with because it's such a beautiful book about generosity, and it meant so much to my father, who came to this country from Mexico and saw his mother sacrifice so much to bring him here, to get him here. And so for him, it's this beautiful book, but it also, as a mother now, there's an element of martyrdom in the tree that I resist a little bit, that I say you have to hold on to yourself too. You have to know where the line is of how much you give away. So, and a creator, I think that comes into play. But all these books, I think it's worth opening the conversation. And I think, yes, I think they have such a huge impact. And I think gender, we draw lines for kids that kids don't see. We're the ones that are drawing the line. My kids, we had friends over the other day, and they all put on the princess dresses, and then they all put on the pirate costume that we had, and they all switched these costumes, and they were all role playing. And it didn't matter if you're a boy or girl or whatever, that's what they found in the closet. That's what they were going to do, and it's fabulous to be a princess, whether you're a boy or a girl, you get to be sparkly. So it was amazing to see that with no judgment and celebrated in all 4 of the kids who were here. And I think that books do that in the same way. And hopefully we can get, by showing them, by just having everything available to kids, you can allow them to identify with people who they may not identify with if someone comes in and says, oh, that doesn't look like you. But then when they do, that's teaching them empathy. That's teaching them that we live in a world with so many dynamic personalities and colors, and it's great.
And I know that besides doing the blog, you're also a writer, and you also direct, and you're also an actress. And so just in general, throughout your creative processes, when you hit a block, when you experience creative blocks, can you share with us and with the viewers how you maneuver through those?
Sure. I'm super type A, and so a lot of times I struggle with perfectionism and wanting something to be just right, and it stops me at times from even getting started. Different projects are intimidating when you start them, and so things that I do are I get other people involved so that I'm beholden to someone else and inspired by someone else, and that definitely gets me out of myself and gets me going. And then the other things I do are try to keep positive. I step away if I need to and try to look at it from a different angle. and try to figure out, well, why else would I be blocked? And usually it's fear. Usually it's that fear, and then I can kind of talk myself around it. Sometimes I write out every bad voice in my head. I write out what it's saying, and then I sit there and argue with myself down. And that's actually really helpful because you realize how silly you're being. And then you just got to get going and roll up your sleeves, and do it, I think.
Is there a particular place or space that you sort of retreat to in order to come back and see it from another angle, or?
I like to be really quiet somewhere, so I usually try to set up a studio space in my house or just even my bedroom if I can shut the door and be alone, just to kind of cleanse and find a new momentum. Yeah, definitely. And then sometimes music really helps me too. A piano, I'll sit at the piano and just play a little bit. Or I'm constantly relearning guitar because I'm terrible, but I always want to learn how to play. So I'll sit and play a song, and usually one night of doing that, I can kind of move around certain things.
Do you have a certain life motto that you live by?
My husband and I make yearly mottos, but I don't know if that I have a life motto. We have yearly mottos that are we had one that was dance, dance, dance. Just general. Sometimes they come back and bite us, but yeah, I don't know one that sticks with me that we chose as Children in Art, and that's a song from Sunday in the Park with George by Sondheim, and that always sticks with me as something that helps me kind of move forward as family, my kids, and the art that I create. And that I see, that I witness, is always a really big part of my growth. Yeah, I don't know. I think of myself a little bit as a gypsy, and that as long as I can kind of keep renewing and keep moving forward and growing, that I feel fresh and enlivened in that way.
Did becoming a mom change the creative process for you?
Absolutely, yeah. Becoming a mom changed everything. It's funny, it changed a lot and then it didn't change a lot. I became a mom. I felt at a certain point after my second daughter was born that I was going into sort of a black hole of motherhood, and I had a moment where I was like, oh, I got to figure this out, crawl out of the black hole. And as I came out of it, I was thinking, well, maybe I'm going to do something completely different, and then I realized it just drew me right back to what I had always done, but deeper and in a more relaxed way, I think, and in a more committed way, because I wasn't doubting it or second guessing it anymore. And you have less time to give to various things when you're a parent, and you want it that way, because you want to be able to give that time to your family and your kids. So it made me more committed. When I do turn to my creativity, it's with a real sense of purpose now, and I feel an obligation to myself and to what I'm doing to give it all I've got while I can focus on it. And also the perfectionism that I sometimes struggle with has sort of gone by the wayside, because I don't have time. Nobody got time for that. I was ain't nobody got time for that. It's just, I don't have time to doubt myself anymore. I mean, this last piece that we did, I directed and was in a production of the last 5 years that we added dance to. And there's a lot of new things in that piece that I wasn't sure would work, but I kind of had to just give over. And we only had rehearsals in the beginning once a week, which for theater is absurd. You really want to get it in your body and kind of continue it, but you do what you can do with the time you have. And so that's what it was. And it turned out, the great thing about that is when it works out, it really surprises you in a good way. So
it was a beautiful show.
Oh, thank you.
It was unexpected, and I thought you guys adding the dance in was really, you would have loved it, because
I'm sorry I couldn't make it.
Oh no, yeah, I'm really glad you got to see it.
Really cool, and how you did the cross of time. I hope you guys can do it again. If you do, we'd love to promote it, because it was just a really beautiful play.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We were really proud of it. It wound up being something that all of us that were working on it just felt so lucky to be a part of. So that's always when you know you're you've done something well.
Yeah, it was moving.
Thank you.
It made me think. I love it. I love when
that's
art
good.
makes you think, and you question other things because of it. So,
I have one thing. So, because we were on the subject about creativity and being a mother and motherhood, and that expression that you sort of have to refine as a mother, or rediscover, better said. But if there was something that you could say to mothers that are sort of going through that process, of re-immersing themselves in a creative way after that process of becoming a mother and settling into that space, what would you, share?
Oh, it's hard because everybody's choices through motherhood, I think, are so particular to their situation. But I think that I would encourage anyone being a mother is a very creative process in itself. So it's tempting to allow that to be your main creative focus, and that's great. But I think that for myself, I wanted to feel my own creativity separate from that as well. That was just something that was important to me. So I would say if that's something that is undeniable in you, find room for that. And you have to create the room before you can create anything else, if that makes sense. Like, I found that I had a period where I gave myself that space. I gave myself a few hours in the afternoon twice a week. And it was excruciating because I didn't know what to make of it yet. I didn't know what else would come forward, but I had these hours and someone else was looking after my kid, and I felt so horrible. I felt so guilty that I wasn't doing my motherly job at that moment. But the truth is, as a mom, you're on all around the clock, and to give yourself a few hours, and it may take you a few weeks, it may take you a few months to sort of know what to do with that space. But that's something that ultimately was so important for me because it brought me back and reconnected me with a part of myself that I knew I had to have moving forward.
And such a beautiful gift to your daughters to see you do that for yourself as well.
I think so. I mean, I notice it in them that they recognize that too, and I think that that's good for them.
Of course, and I'm sure that's making a large impact, whether you believe it or not. If you had to describe yourself in one word,
it's our favorite question.
It really is.
The word that keeps coming up when I think about that is gypsy.
You said that earlier as well. Yeah.
I think deep down I have this sort of gypsy blood, and I think it's something that I know what it is. It's that I love new experiences. That is something that I desperately need, and whether it's travel, which for a long time I feel like that was kind of satisfying my gypsy cravings, and art does that. Any kind of new acting role does that, and children do that in their own way. It's a more domesticated gypsy life, but it's gypsy in its own way. But yeah, I think gypsy. I would stand by that.
Okay. And is there anything that didn't work out for you? That hindsight.
Oh, there's
you're so thankful it didn't.
Yeah, I developed a role in a show. I was in the world premiere of this show, and I had a small role in it. And it was early on I had just gotten out of grad school, and I got this role, and the show kind of built and had momentum, and it was very clear when we were doing it regionally that it was going to go to Broadway at a certain point, and it got picked up really fast. And I had this small role, and I thought, this is fantastic, like my first real job, and I'm going to Broadway. And then they recast me, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, I've been very lucky in so many areas in my life, and that was something that I sort of took for granted that was going to happen, and then it kind of went away, and it broke my heart, as an artist. But then I realized that there were a lot of realizations that came out of it, but I think I realized that it's such a long road being an artist, and it doesn't matter. The individual jobs are less important than the long road of being an artist. And that was the beginning of that learning lesson, which keeps deepening and deepening and deepening. But I am grateful because so many things happened in the next few years for me on a personal level that were super important. And I feel like that I would have been on a different road, and I would have had a different mindset about what success is. And I'm glad that I'm glad, because now every new step I'm committed to the work for myself and not for this sort of worldly goal, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Worldly goals are nice too. But, I do feel like that deeper commitment came out of initial disappointment.
I love that.
Yeah. It's interesting to always hear how an artist answers that question, and what seems like a derailment is actually putting you right on the course that you need to be on. So,
is there anything that we didn't ask you that we should have, or that you would love to express or share?
No, I'm so glad that you're both doing this. I feel like it's wonderful to see friends making work together.
Oh, thank you.
And I feel, I feel lucky because I collaborate a lot with friends and with my husband, and we've worked together in such different capacities. And it's just wonderful, I think, when you can find friends that you can grow with in that way,
We love it.
Yeah.
And we get to speak with wonderful people like you. And it helps us grow and expand, and it informs this
it's a great project.
Well. Yeah, we love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you, guys.
We loved speaking with Marisa, and we look forward to following your journey and helping promote and support you in any way that we can.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. So exciting.
Yeah.
That's, I think, part of the most, or for me, it's so beautiful to be able to sort of sit with you and in 2 years continue to see you on that journey of expansion, whether it be with the blog or as an actress or as a director, and that we get to support you in that is, I think, really enriching and sort of inspiring for us as well as artists. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for
so much.
having us.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.